Hey, it's our Week 18 recap with a wild card weekend preview, plus a look at Black Monday, guys getting fired, or in some cases, not fired. It's the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast for Monday, January 6th, 2025. I'm Aaron Schatz. You know me as that DVOA guy from FTN Fantasy, and he is Mike Tanier. You know him from his Substack at miketanier.substack.com. Don't forget, we are here at 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays. We take your questions live. I'll start with one from Kyle. The 2024 FTN DVOA data is completely missing. It's not missing. There is an error where it is defaulting to 2025, and it was supposed to be fixed last week, and it's not fixed yet. Just change the year to 2024. But do it in about an hour because the new ratings are not up yet. I have not had time to add them because the day after the regular season ends is very, very busy. Don't forget, we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports, the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. And if you haven't gotten on board yet, this is the time. It's the playoffs. Your regular season leagues are all over. You got to play something. Underdog is there. They have the new customer FTN special, up to $1,000 on your first time deposit. You head over to Underdog, deposit match when you sign up with code FTN. That is up to $1,000 extra on a deposit match. So the playoffs are here, and you can still play fantasy with Underdog Fantasy.
Great. Wildcard weekend is great for fantasy.
Wildcard weekend is a lot of fun.
Yes.
And first, we're going to talk a little bit, just review last night's awesome game a little bit, which was actually, I think, closer than it looked through three quarters because red zone performance is variable. And people don't understand that just because Darnold had a bad day in the red zone doesn't mean that the Vikings now suck in the red zone for every game. They will bounce back next week against the Rams in the red zone. Very, very likely.
Remember running plays in the red zone? Those used to be fun.
The shocking thing to me was the Lions did their thing. They play man coverage and blitz, and Darnold has killed man coverage this year.
Right.
And he was terrible.
Yes. Yeah, and there were coverage. Like he was pressured. It was coverage pressure. Like, whatever alchemy suddenly, like, oh, we can match up with Justin Jefferson, Addison, and Hockenson fine. The Lions were doing that, particularly in the first half. They were forcing Darnold to, like, not be able to just get rid of the ball and let it rip. And
the Lions pulled away in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they definitely, that was a big win, but it wasn't quite as big as it. Like, I feel like the quality of the win was like a 2-touchdown win, not like a 3-touchdown win. And I realize that that's like grasping at straws, but I do feel like the Vikings, like people in Vikings land are like very doom and gloom today. And I don't know if that makes sense to be as doom and gloom as they are. Lions fans are excited, and that makes sense.
Arif, I get your emails. I get your Substack about like the death of hope. That's overdoing it. But I think there's two sides to this. One is doomerism in Minnesota, and the other is these people who are like coming out of the woodwork to declare the fraud, because we tend to think of the Vikings as frauds, and this is not that Vikings team. This is a really good Vikings team who were, as of the third quarter, very much in that game.
I also think that game makes Jahmyr Gibbs an Offensive Player of the Year candidate. Or at least you have 5 slots on your ballot to put guys candidate.
Well, yeah, you got slot 4 or 5 there.
Right. I'm not saying he's slot 1, but you get 5 slots. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is pretty much a candidate for one of those 5 slots after last night.
On one of those, you put Justin Jefferson on one of those. You put
now you've run into my problem. I have 6 guys for 5 spots.
Jamar Chase on one of them. Bijan really should be talked about in terms of keeping that.
And the guy you're not going to mention is the guy who ended up with the 2nd highest DYAR at his position of all time.
What position?
Tight end.
George
Kittle.
DYR?
Yeah.
Really?
Because everybody else who had a great tight end season caught like 68% of passes, and Kittle caught like 85%. He was incredibly efficient this year.
For DVOA, I could see that, but DR, it really stacked up.
Yeah, below Gronk, but ahead of Kelsey.
Wow.
And plus, and you add to that he's an awesome blocker, right? Like
Yes.
he's not, right. Like if you think of both parts of a tight end's job, he's great at. He might be the best in the league at both parts of the tight end's job.
I think he's the most balanced all-around tight end in the league.
Yeah.
It is, and I guess, shame on me. The 49ers disappear from the playoff picture. I was like, out of my brain, I don't see that he's consistently out there having these games late in the year.
Right. He was very, very good, even as the rest of the 49ers collapsed around him. So let's talk about, speaking of collapsing, let's talk about Black Monday.
Yeah.
We'll start with Gerard Mayo. Now, there's one take that's going around the internet is that Mayo got a really raw deal, and that essentially the Crafts hired him specifically to be a one-year guy so that somebody else didn't have to be the post-Belichick guy, and always planning to fire him every year. And I think they love him, and I think they wanted him to succeed.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think I've said previously is I think that they hired him because they thought he would be a leader of men, not because he's some kind of great scheming or analytical genius. And then they didn't give him the men to lead. But
good.
The in-game decision-making was bad and inconsistent. And some of the stuff that happened in press conferences was weird. And I think that there is a feeling like, look, we've got the quarterback. We can't, how many years do we have Drake May on a rookie contract? We can't, if Mayo's not the guy, we can't waste another year.
If you want to convince me that you are not Joe Judge or Matt Patricia or the head coaching version of Flores, don't go out there in press conferences and sound exactly like them, where it's like, I'm popping off at the mouth, I'm popping off at my coordinators, I'm popping off at the players. I'm kind of getting taken by surprise by questions, things like that for this bad team. And I think when I would hear Mayo communicate like that to the media in these 5-minute scripted press conferences, I wonder how he was coming across to everyone else in the organization. So I'm not stunned by this. Your thoughts on Elliott Wolf?
I understand the idea that you don't fire a GM right away because the new guy would have to start so late in the process of figuring out the draft. That's why scouts get fired in May, right? Is because we're in prime draft figure out time. They didn't do a great job last year.
Nope.
But I don't get the same feeling about Elliott Wolf that he was like way in over his head that you would get about Mayo. So I kind of understand. There's another GM we're going to talk about in a minute that I really don't understand.
I know who's coming, and we're going to talk.
But Wolf, it's just been 1 year, and it was a bad draft, right?
And my argument on that is Wolf has been in the organization. He's been around this for a series of bad drafts. So he was
right. And plus the bad draft is they took Polk. They took Polk when everyone thought Polk should go.
Yeah.
They didn't overdraft. Like the problem with Belichick in the final years was he was overdrafting guys like Cole Strange, and everyone was scratching their heads going, what the hell?
Right.
Polk went when people thought Polk would go in the early second round. That's when everybody thought he was going to go.
Yeah.
They have not yet fired the assistants, but I would think that's coming. And we all know what's coming. They're going to do a couple of show interviews for the Rooney Rule.
And here comes Vrabel.
But here comes Mike Vrabel. And I will point out that Mike Vrabel never worked for Bill Belichick.
Correct.
Okay. Mike Vrabel played for Bill Belichick. But what Mike Vrabel has that most of these Belichick-y guys didn't have is that he went outside the organization. And he got experience at Ohio State in Houston.
Yes.
And then he was a head coach in Tennessee. And then he got the last year in Cleveland. So he's been in other situations besides working for Belichick, which means he has a handle on when to maybe dial the Belichickiness down.
Right. Now, I mean, he had some success in Tennessee. He had weak rosters that would make the playoffs.
He overcame that ridiculous amount of injuries in order to be the worst number one seed of all time.
Right. He dragged Tannehill sort of off the scrap heap and put him in a position where he had a couple of very, very good years. And when you say outside the organization, remember, he was in Houston with O'Brien, so he was sort of
so sort of in the organization. But Ohio State was not, and Tennessee was his own. He had his own organization. And,
I feel like Kraft needs to get out of the family a little bit, but I don't think he will. And I don't think Vrabel's a terrible hire. But just to go back to that thing with Mayo, like, do people really believe that if the Patriots went 7-10 and a bunch of guys developed and they were playing for the playoffs till December, they were just going to fire Mayo? Is that the theory? Like, oh, he was always one and done. There was no chance. That's ludicrous.
I don't. I mean, he got a little bit of a raw deal, but
right.
I don't think he was a sacrificial lamb.
No.
Everybody around here feels like he was over his head, and the press conferences were weird. They just were
weird. The Judon thing at the beginning of the year was weird, and it always felt like there was this sort of friction there, and with some of the other players. But yeah, he didn't have the horses. I think he just made a bad situation worse.
Jaguars fired Doug Peterson, but not Trent Baalke. Now, this is one where, unlike Elliott Wolf, where you're like, well, he was only been in for 1 year, whatever. Yeah. Baalke has been there for years, and it has not been good.
Right.
How is he still, like, I would fire Baalke and maybe keep Peterson. Peterson's a better coach than Baalke as a GM at this point, right? Like, what?
Peterson's teams unravel because Peterson is not very detail oriented. He's not like very sticklery, and that's why you get these teams where 3rd and 1 is an impossible.
The same thing happened in Philly, which is the first couple of years were good, and then it unraveled.
Right, and you see, that receiver's in the wrong place. Oh, they didn't execute properly. Oh, in the red zone, they didn't execute properly. They're not executing because the practices were shortened by 45 minutes, and they're not out there enough, and they're not getting. And you've got Press Taylor too, who's not exactly a stickler for the details. But Baalke is a mongoose of a man who makes really bizarre personnel decisions, spends a ton of money, overpays for guys, put together a roster that I think he convinced the Cons was a lot better than it was this year. And the synergy of that with the offense going out there and being bad at execution and getting injury after injury after injury sunk this. I would have done a clean slate.
Right. Except for the scouts, because they prepare for the next draft and whatever. You fire them in May, but whatever. But yeah, I would have brought in a GM first, and then the GM brings in his coach, and then there you go.
And if you're interviewing a defensive coordinator as a head coach, and you're worried that they might not be a great communicator to your quarterback, if, for example, Brian Flores gets interviews, I would have that defensive coach. I'd say I'm bringing Peterson along to be my quarterback coach, my offensive coordinator, and the guy to pat the quarterback on the head if I yelled at him too hard and make sure things work out okay. Because I think Peterson is good at that element of things.
I wonder if I don't think Flores and Peterson have a relationship, or Aaron Glenn and Peterson. Trying to think of other defensive coordinators who might get head coaching interviews.
He worked with all the Reed guys in general, so it would be like Gannon or somebody, and that's just a weird thing about the Cardinals right now.
The Bengals fired Lou Anarumo,
Captain Lou,
defensive coordinator, which is a really interesting. Because I feel like whatever happened to the Bengals this year was not necessarily his fault, but at the same time, he's always been a bit overrated. He had a good run that 1 year in the playoffs, but for the most part, the Bengals have had average or below average defenses his whole time there.
Right, and I think his best season as a coordinator, they happen to have Jesse Bates and DJ Reader and Von Bell, and of course, they're the Bengals. So they got rid of Jesse Bates and DJ Reader and Von Bell because they didn't want to pay them, because they wanted to spend that money on not paying T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So you have that element of things. But I obviously this is somebody had to go. Some head had to roll for the fact that this team was 4-7, in November with all the talent it has, and Captain Lou was the obvious choice there. So you alluded to it. He's overrated. I think there's a lot of people in the league, and I think a lot of people in this sphere who are big Anarumo fans, and
he'll get another job, I would think.
He'll get another job
for next year.
Right. He'll be a popular choice for coordinator, or he'll take a step back and be, linebacker coach for a year. But yeah, he'll get another job.
29th ranked DVOA defense is very hard to make the playoffs with, says Hitchhiker's Pie. They also fired their offensive line coach, their linebackers coach, and a few others.
He's good. They're going
a number of firings.
Yeah.
Bill Houston wants to know, what do we perceive is the best open head coach position?
I haven't thought about it.
I am going to try not to be biased when I say I think it's New England because they've got the quarterback and he's on a rookie contract.
Right.
And they have a ton of cap space and they have the 4th pick.
Yes. That's a good combination.
The other one is Jacksonville, where the owner is very hands-off and they have the quarterback, we think. But the quarterback is also being paid veteran money, not rookie money.
And you've got Balky. And you have that guy screaming in your ear all the time. So and somebody came to me on the Blue Sky and was like, or will the Patriots be hardened by Robert Kraft's reputation? And I'm like, you think Robert Kraft has a bad reputation in the league? Have you met the other owners in the NFL? No, people are going to come in and probably be like enthusiastic about working for Robert Kraft in that situation. My only question with the Patriots is how hard will it be to get the everything else? The reason you have so much cap space
is because they need everything else.
Right.
Yes.
Nobody
they have a quarterback and a corner.
Yes. Gonzalez and May.
And then they need everything else. Let's talk about who didn't get fired. All right, we'll start with the Giants. They did not fire Brian Daboll or Joe Schoen. I have a feeling we have slightly different opinions on this.
Okay.
I feel like Daboll and Schoen came in with very good backgrounds. And Daboll was a very good coach that first year. And I wonder how much of what's gone wrong with the Giants is ownership dictated rather than coach and GM dictated.
Well,
that doesn't mean it was the right thing to keep them.
Right.
Because maybe a fresh start helps. But yeah, I don't know if this is all their fault.
Mara's a weenie. Okay, so we'll start. Ownership is a problem there. He's basically a Jerry Jones who like wears a better suit and has better diction. So that's that. It go back to last year with Daboll and his feud with Martindale and Wink Martindale disappearing. And then there's this friction with Kafka, and then Kafka has to stay. And then I go back to week 2 when the Giants lost because Daboll forgot to activate his kicker. You had Graham Gano injured on Friday night, and you just go into the game like, well, maybe he'll be fine for warm-ups. So it's like, who is running this team that you don't – there was a kicker on the practice squad. They had Rutgers' old kicker there. No, we're going to go up against the Commanders, winnable game at that point in the year when the Commanders are a rebuilding team, and say, we're just not going to kick field goals today if Gano is hurt. And I just wonder at, like, the decision-making of Daboll. And with Sheen, Evan Neal, Andrew Waller. And now I get the Daniel Jones thing was probably a Mara decision ultimately, so that contract is that big. There's still
I think what I'm thinking about when I think that they may have been hamstrung by ownership decision.
Yeah, look at the Waller deal. Look at trading for Burns when the team wasn't ready for it. How do you getting rid of Saquon is fine, realizing you're not going to pay him. There's no money for McKinney. Leo Williams a couple years. Leo Williams has a career year this year, and he's one of the guys who go in the
very good.
Yeah, again, I keep going back to Evan Neal. Look at these draft classes, and look how. So I just whatever.
Yeah. The other one is the Colts. The Colts did not fire Shane Steichen or Chris Ballard.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't look at the Colts and go, "This is Shane Steichen's fault." He can't. He's still considered a very good designer of offenses.
Agreed.
They drafted a guy who was not ready for the NFL, and we're 2 years in, and he's still, despite the highs, not ready for the NFL.
Right.
And that's not Steichen's. How much is that Steichen's fault? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, because I don't know how much Richardson's holding up his end of the bargain on that in terms of, pushing himself to develop. I look at Ballard and I look at this cap situation on the roster. Roster's pretty good. Roster's pretty solid. Cap situation is really well managed, whereas they've got money to spend. All these contracts came in. He signed the guy a year early rather than a year late, so they're on reasonable deals. And I don't look at Richardson saying, how did you draft that kid? I mean, look at him. That's why you drafted him.
Right. Yeah. Like he wasn't ready for the NFL, but I think anybody would have drafted him that high because of the natural talent and hoped that he had gotten ready faster. Yeah.
Exactly. And you're not going to say, hey, a new regime's going to help this kid figure it out. He needs more of Steichen in his ear. I think what they need to do is they really need to set expectations for year 3 and have a plan if they don't meet them, and get a better bridge / ripcord than Flacco.
Yeah.
Among the veteran QBs. Yeah, I was thinking of Dalton because
cornerback. And they have certain positions like outside cornerback that they just need improvement. They just need improvement.
That's true. It can't just be more in the slot. But that's the thing. They can get that in the draft. They've got some money. They can grab a guy, and they can impact that. They need a quarterback who can complete 50% of his passes. That shouldn't be hard in the year 2024, 2025. They need one.
Jake Silverman wants to know, do we have a guess as to who would be the next head coach and quarterback of the Jets? I honestly have no idea here. Like, I don't know who they're going to interview. I don't really know at all. Michael Allen Brewer says maybe Kirk Cousins. I don't know. Like,
for coach or for quarterback?
Oh, no, he said for the Colts. Cousins as the Colts.
Oh,
as the Richardson
that's
backup. That would be interesting. The Jets I don't know what the Jets are going to do.
That'd be peak Ballard. Just bring Matt Ryan back. Just go. The Jets. I mean, they're interviewing Bobby Slowick. Imagine watching this Texan seasons this year and saying we got to get that offensive coordinator. We got.
Do you like screens?
Say again.
Do you like screens?
Do you like screens? I hear you like mudkips and screens that the other team knows coming.
Let's go through DVOA. Then this is going to be playoff teams, weighted DVOA.
Okay.
But adjusted for week 18.
Okay.
Denver had the 3rd best single game ever because the Chiefs did not care. I said 4th best on Twitter, and then I had to fix something. And when I fixed something, it changed to the opponent adjustments, and now it's 3rd best. And it comes with a big fat asterisk. It's just kind of funny. Like, it's not really a representation of how good Denver is or how good Kansas City is. It's just hilarious.
Are you
like it? Yeah.
Are you going to scrape a little off of that so it's not sitting in the system, or is it?
Yeah. So for the preview, I mean, for the actual ratings, every game counts. Okay. But for the ratings I use for playoff odds, week 18 is gone from those teams. And so this is what I'm about to count up. Is it took out week 18 for the Rams, took out week 18 for the Eagles, took out week 18 for the Bills, took out week 18 for the Broncos and Chiefs.
Gotcha.
Weighted towards more recent games. Here we go.
Okay.
14th, Houston.
Of course. They're terrible. Bad team.
13th, Pittsburgh.
Sinking like a stone, yes.
12th, Tampa Bay.
Yeah, well, they had the bad game. They didn't play well against the Saints. And they had a bad game sort of against the Cowboys, and they're just, kind of in daisy
And
stuff.
then this one is the surprise. 11th, Minnesota.
That is a stunner.
Yeah, they have won a lot of games in a row, but they were generally close. Uh-huh. And weighted DVOA now takes off a couple of really big wins they had early in the season.
Oh my
God. We'll get to this in a second, talking about the wild card games. But the Vikings actually have a weighted rating lower than the Rams.
That is stunning. And I'm looking now.
I'm not sure I believe it, right? Like, I'm not sure. Like, do I really think the Vikings should be underdogs to the Rams? No, I don't really think that. No. I feel like the system is a little bit over importing the Buffalo Rams game, but this is the way it is. That Minnesota is 11th.
The 2 games I look at now a few weeks ago were the Cardinals win, where I think the Vikings didn't play well and the Cardinals kind of fell down to their level, and the first of the 2 Bears games where you're kind of getting this nip and tuck game with the Bears. I think it went overtime, and you shouldn't be getting into nip and tuck games with the Bears at that point. But recently, I thought, again, the scores were close, but I thought that the Vikings were playing well, so that is surprising.
10th, this is adjusted for week 18, Denver.
Okay.
Yeah, week 18.
Chargers. Yeah.
Washington, 9th.
They're the team that I've looked at and said they're not playing as good as they look. lately. They didn't.
Yeah, I feel like Daniels was not good this week.
No, they pulled
really,
him.
was he? I mean, Mariota came in and played the second half of the game.
They pulled him because it was like it just wasn't going well, and like, what are we doing here? And
Michael, right, and it doesn't matter. So, like, let's not like ruin his confidence. And
you go back to the Saints game where Lattimore has to make a play for them at the end. They beat the Eagles because Hurts got hurt. Let's get real. The Falcons game was kind of all over the place, and that could have been a loss gone the other way if the Falcons knew how to call timeouts and things. So I'm stunned that the Commanders are above the Vikings. Let's put it that way.
I am too.
Yeah,
I am too. Number 8, the Rams.
Let's win some more games 10-9 against the
Their defense has played well. But I don't know if those corners. It's interesting. They beat the Vikings. We'll get to this in a second. They beat the Vikings a few weeks ago, but it's interesting.
I don't say it.
Chargers 7th.
Playing well lately. Playing better lately than they were earlier in the year when they were winning games.
Kansas City 6th.
Okay. A lot of really good teams at the top here.
Buffalo and Green Bay are basically tied 5th and 4th.
Buffalo, no last week, no this week.
This is without the Patriots game.
Yes. This is without but before that, they were kind of playing with their food a little bit, had the upset. That's all in their rankings.
The Lions, as long as you don't adjust for the defensive injuries, are 3rd.
Yeah.
If you adjust for the defensive injuries a little bit, they're a little lower than that.
Right.
And I still think, despite how good they were this week, you have to still consider the defensive injuries. Anzalone may be back, but a lot of other guys aren't.
Exactly.
Eagles 2nd. Ravens 1st.
Number 1, the Ravens.
System loves the Ravens.
System loves the Ravens. They managed to find another dozen penalties.
The Chiefs, by the way, I mentioned this on the internet, on the social media, because of the BS Denver game, are the most overperforming team of all time based on point differential.
Yeah, I believe it.
But that last game was nonsense, right? Like, so it has an asterisk. Everything with this year's Chiefs has an asterisk on it.
In fairness, though, with those super high performing teams, don't they all have a lot of them have a week 17 or a week 18?
Some of them do. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's got there.
And again, like I keep saying about the Chiefs, the thing about the Chiefs being overrated is that they're not like a 15-2 all-time great team. They're just a Super Bowl contender.
Yes. they're just like a 2-time champion that is going out there and is ready to face the Ravens. And
they may be like the 5th best team in the league. Well, you know what? The 5th best team in the league wins the championship some years. So that's a contender. That's a Super Bowl contender. Yep.
That proves DVOA is flawed, Aaron. If the 5th best team wins.
All right. So here's our schedule for the wild card games.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday at 4:30, Chargers -2.5 at Texans.
I think the Chargers can do it.
I think the Chargers can do it too.
I think the Chargers can do it too. I think that's the over-under was too high on that one because that's going to be a field goal run.
I didn't write down what the totals were. I only wrote down the lines.
I'll grab it right quick. Just be patient with me. The total right now is 42.5. I might go under that.
Saturday at 8. Ravens -8.5 against the Steelers. Your feeling was with the Ravens, with the penalties and everything, that line is too big.
It's now 9.5. It's out of control. That line is out of control. I take the Steelers.
You like the Steelers to cover?
Steelers to cover.
Sunday at 1. Bills -7.5 against the Broncos.
They can cover 7.5.
I feel like pretty good about the Bills in that one because Patrick Surtain can cover one guy, but he can't prevent Josh Allen from running around.
No.
And I've talked about Riley Moss is not as good as people thought this year.
Yeah, I was,
and I think the Bills will be fine.
I was really digging into that, and like Moss, it looked like he had like 3 or 4 really good games early in the season. Then they got exposed a little bit. Then he got hurt. And then he came back. And I think that early season halo followed him a little bit along the way.
Maybe a little bit of that.
Yeah. And the Bills are going to be very physical, and the Bills are going to give very, very little on defense against that team. Spread moved to 8.5 already, by the way. I don't think
8.5. Okay.
I guess the 9.
I still would go Bills. I still would go Bills.
Yeah.
Sunday at 4:30, Eagles -3.5 against the Packers. Vegas sees what DVOA sees about how the Packers have played lately.
Okay.
But the Eagles do look like the strongest team in the NFC right now, considering the injuries in Detroit.
Mm-hmm. You've got a.
I mean, I think I like Eagles.
I like Eagles. We've got a big Christian Watson injury to monitor. The Love injuries are nothing.
That takes away the deep threat a lot from the Packers.
Right. That takes away one guy. And it also puts Dontavian Wicks on the field. And when you talk about, oh, gosh, they have a real problem with dropping passes in Green Bay.
He does drop passes.
It's him. It's him. He's the guy in the hot dog suit.
This one surprised me that they put it in prime time.
Okay.
Buccaneers -3 versus Commanders.
Yeah, it seems like that should flip with the Eagles game.
Right? Like, doesn't it feel like Philadelphia and Green Bay is should be prime time when you think about the size of the fan bases and the quality of the teams?
Washington, Tampa Bay sounds like the 1 o'clock Sunday. It really
sounds but it's not. It's the 8 o'clock game. That one, I kind of like the Commanders, I guess. Both teams are about the same because I agree with you that DVOA seems to be a little bit too high on the Commanders. But so I kind of like the Commanders and the points.
I'm with you. It's a very inscrutable game. What you need to watch, and we'll talk on Thursday, injury report for the cornerbacks of the Buccaneers because they were without Winfield. They've been without Dean. They were without them the other day. Rattler was able to move the ball a little bit. It was, and they're also tight end is a situation. Let's see where the Buccaneers land health-wise, and then I'll be more comfortable with something.
And then the Monday night game, right? Monday is always a 4-5 game, so they can plan the schedule for the following week before the Monday night game is played.
Yes.
Is the Vikings -2.5 at the Rams. And DVOA is going to pick the Rams.
Wow.
But I think I'm going with the Vikings.
Yeah.
I think part of it, by the way, is DVOA. I don't have a thing that gives the Rams less home field advantage.
Okay.
But we know that the Rams and the Chargers, it feels like, I haven't looked for sure because it's only been a couple of seasons, but it feels like those are not home games.
They're
right?
not home games. And Vikings fans travel. They travel.
And I feel like the Vikings are going to bounce back a little bit from this.
Yeah.
I know the Rams beat the Vikings a few weeks ago, but I feel like the Rams corners are not going to be able to hold against Jefferson and Addison.
And you had a 4-touchdown performance by Stafford when they last met. I don't see that happening again against this defense. I think that this is a second chance against them. I feel like the Vikings win this, and then I start getting skeptical about them. That's where I stand with that team.
Right. I mean, Dan Campbell said at the end of the game, see you in 2 weeks, which is a reasonable idea. The Vikings win this game. If the Commanders lose and the Packers lose, the next round is Vikings at Lions again. Right.
And Dan Campbell's already licking his chops for it because that's how he...
Because they've already destroyed them and because they're going to have a week of rest.
Yep.
One more question. Bill Houston wants to know, why is Rex Ryan posturing as a Jets head coach candidate?
Because the team is being run by a 16-year-old and Rex Ryan is a 60-year-old, 16-year-old. I don't know. I can't fathom the idea that they're going to come out of this saying Rex Ryan again. I cannot.
Yeah, I can't either. I think he's not coming back to coaching. It seems a little weird to me.
Yeah, it's completely weird. And the idea that he is chirping. He's chirping about this. Like, I think this is going to be me. I can't tell if he's grandstanding, just putting his name out there, having fun with this, or if this is legitimate.
Yeah, I don't think he's the next head coach of the Jets.
Bobby Slowick. Arthur Smith is interviewing.
Arthur Smith is interviewing, yeah. Well, I mean, they want an offensive mind for whoever their next quarterback is. Beats me who that's going to be, but...
Offensive mind, Arthur Smith.
It's Carson Beck. I don't know.
The merger of FedEx and Johnson & Johnson that you never thought was going to happen.
You can get all your baby shampoo delivered immediately.
All your baby shampoo delivered immediately, but as long as Aaron Rodgers is there, no COVID tests, no vaccines.
No COVID tests, no vaccines. All right, that does it for today's show. Thank you to everybody who is watching and listening. Don't forget to like the show, subscribe to the show, and tell your friends about the show. We will be back Thursday at 11 a.m. to do an actual preview of Wildcard Weekend with things like stats and splits and the stuff that you usually come to us for when it comes to previewing games. We're going to do 5 games, not the Monday night. We'll wait for Monday night till next week. All right, guys, that does it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on Thursday.